The opulent Manhattan penthouse shimmered under the city lights, a testament to a life meticulously curated for success. Inside, a man stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, the vast urban sprawl a dazzling backdrop to his quiet contemplation. His gaze, however, wasn't fixed on the glittering skyline but on a small, faded photograph clutched loosely in his hand. It depicted a young woman, her smile radiant, framed by the rustic charm of a simple village. Her eyes held a warmth that seemed to defy the glossy, cold perfection of his modern existence. The contrast was stark, almost jarring, the undeniable luxury surrounding him versus the humble, forgotten world captured in that brittle image. It was a world he had long abandoned, a love he had left behind, and a past that now, inexplicably, seemed to be calling him back. This photograph, a relic from a different lifetime, hinted at a story of lost connection and an impending reunion that promised to shake the very foundations of his carefully constructed reality. This was Michael, a name synonymous with innovation and wealth in the tech world. In his late 30s, he possessed the sharp intellect and relentless drive that had propelled him from obscurity to the pinnacle of financial success. His days were a whirlwind of high-stakes meetings, international travel, and the constant hum of groundbreaking projects. He owned a sprawling mansion in the Hamptons, a sleek apartment in New York City, and a private jet that ferried him across continents. Yet, beneath the veneer of triumph, there lay a palpable, quiet melancholy. It wasn't the angst of an unfulfilled life, but rather the subtle ache of something left unresolved, a shadow cast by memories of simpler times, and a love he had once cherished above all else. His achievements, as grand as they were, often felt hollow in the vast quiet of his success, like a perfectly designed room missing its most essential piece. He had conquered the material world, but the emotional landscape of his past remained an uncharted territory, unexplored and hauntingly present. One crisp autumn morning, as Michael reviewed quarterly reports in his home office, a room far larger than any house in his childhood village, a package arrived. It wasn't the usual stack of business proposals or invitations to exclusive galas. This was different, wrapped in plain brown paper, addressed in a cramped, unfamiliar hand. His assistant, usually meticulous, had placed it on his antique mahogany desk with a curious glance. Michael tore it open, his brow furrowing as he recognized the postmark. His old village, a place he hadn't seen in a decade. Inside, nestled among a few dried wildflowers, was a single, handwritten letter. The paper was slightly yellowed, the ink smudged in places, a stark contrast to the crisp digital communications that filled his daily life. He unfolded it with a sense of trepidation, his heart beginning to beat a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. The words were simple, yet they struck him with the force of a physical blow. It was from an old acquaintance, a distant relative of Ilara, his first love. The letter spoke of her, of course, but it wasn't a casual update. It hinted at a significant turn of events in her life, a challenge she was facing, and a subtle plea for help, though not explicitly stated. The details were vague, almost deliberately so, yet they painted a picture of difficulty, of hardship that stirred a forgotten sense of duty within him. This unexpected missive, a ghost from his past, shattered the carefully constructed peace of his present. Dormant emotions surged to the surface: guilt, longing, a profound sense of incompleteness. His perfectly ordered reality began to unravel, replaced by the chaotic whispers of what-ifs and should-haves. He reread the letter, the simple phrases taking on monumental weight. each word a tether pulling him back to a world he thought he'd outgrown. The sophisticated world he inhabited, with its complex algorithms and global markets, suddenly felt insipid compared to the raw, visceral pull of this village plea. The letter lingered in his mind, persistent and unavoidable. It spoke of Ilara, the girl with the brightest smile and the kindest heart, the one he had promised to return for, a promise that had dissolved into the relentless pursuit of ambition. He pictured her face, clearer now than it had been in years, and a wave of regret washed over him. The thought of her struggling, of her facing hardship alone, was an unbearable weight. His mind raced, torn between the comfortable, predictable future he had built and the tumultuous, unpredictable past that was now demanding his attention. The letter was a call, a summons he couldn't ignore, forcing him to confront the unresolved chapters of his life. Before we delve deeper into Michael's journey back to the past and the extraordinary revelations awaiting him, remember to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories of love, loss, and unexpected triumphs. Don't miss out on what happens next. The unexpected letter, a jarring intrusion from a forgotten past, lay heavy on Michael's polished mahogany desk. Its simple cursive, a stark contrast to the sleek digital interfaces that dominated his daily life, seemed to hum with an almost accusatory energy. He stared at it, his reflection in the glass of his skyscraper office window mirroring a man who had everything, and yet suddenly felt profoundly hollow. The thought of returning to that dusty village, to the life he had so deliberately shed, sent a cold shiver down his spine. His meticulously constructed world, a fortress of steel and glass, felt suddenly fragile, permeable to the ghosts of his youth. He grappled with the decision, a silent war waging within him. His modern life, a symphony of high-stakes deals, exclusive parties, and the ceaseless hum of innovation, clashed violently with the image of Ilara, forever etched in his memory against a backdrop of sun-drenched fields and humble cottages. The guilt, a persistent dull ache he had successfully suppressed for a decade, clawed its way back to the surface. He remembered the raw ambition that had consumed him, the desperate need to escape the confines of his small world, to prove himself worthy of something more. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had left Ilara behind, not with malice, but with a blind, self-serving determination that had ultimately cost him a piece of himself. He had promised to return, a vow whispered under a starry sky, a promise that had withered under the harsh glare of city lights and burgeoning opportunities. The memory of her trusting gaze, her hand clasped firmly in his as they dreamed of futures both together and apart, twisted uncomfortably in his gut. The letter's content, vaguely hinting at Ilara's struggles, became the undeniable tipping point. It spoke not of specific ailments or financial ruin, but rather of a trying time and a need for community support, phrases that, to Michael's affluent sensibilities, screamed destitution. The carefully chosen words, designed perhaps to elicit sympathy without humiliation, painted a picture of hardship that he couldn't ignore. This wasn't merely a nostalgic summons. It was a plea, veiled yet potent, that pierced through his carefully cultivated emotional detachment. He imagined her, once vibrant and full of life, now withered by circumstance, a shadow of the girl he had loved. The thought was unbearable. He had vowed to protect her, to provide for her, and in his absence, life had apparently dealt her a cruel hand. He closed his eyes, instantly transported back to the warmth of Ilara's hand in his, the scent of wildflowers on a summer breeze, the shared laughter echoing through sun-dappled groves. Their love had been an innocent, boundless thing, woven into the fabric of their childhood. They had imagined grand adventures together, journeys beyond the village, side by side. He remembered her unwavering belief in his potential, her quiet strength, her encouraging words as he spoke of grand designs and a life far removed from their humble beginnings. She had listened without judgment, her eyes alight with a shared dream, even as he unconsciously began to drift towards a path she could not follow. He recalled the day he left, a backpack slung over his shoulder, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. Ilara had stood at the edge of the village, her beautiful face etched with a sadness she tried to conceal, a single tear escaping despite her brave smile. "Go, Michael," she had whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Achieve everything you set out to do. I'll be here." Those words, meant to be comforting, had instead become a silent reproach, a heavy burden on his conscience. He had promised to write, to visit, to never forget. Over time, the letters grew sporadic, the visits non-existent, swallowed by the relentless demands of his new life. He had convinced himself that she would understand, that his success was, in some obscure way, for both of them. But now, faced with her potential suffering, that justification crumbled into dust. A wave of responsibility, mixed with a powerful, almost magnetic curiosity, washed over him. He needed to see her, to understand the truth behind the cryptic letter. He needed to confront the past he had so diligently tried to erase. The deep-seated longing for a connection to his roots, to a simpler, more authentic version of himself, surged irrepressibly. He pictured her face, older now, perhaps worn, but still possessing that quiet dignity. He imagined the questions she might ask, the pain in her eyes, the silent accusation of his decade-long absence. He braced himself for a scene of destitution, for an Ilara broken by life, mirroring the image the letter had subtly painted in his mind. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that he had to go back. 10 years had passed, a lifetime in some ways, but the umbilical cord to his past, to Ilara, had never truly been severed. The decision, once paralyzing, was now clear. He would return to his hometown, not as the triumphant prodigal son, but as a man seeking answers, seeking redemption, preparing for an emotional confrontation that he knew would redefine everything he thought he understood about success, love, and loyalty. His private jet was ready. His mind, however, was anything but. The humming ascent of Michael's private jet felt increasingly distant as the ground rushed up to meet him, a jarring transition from the ethereal heights of luxury to the palpable reality of Earth. The sleek, climate-controlled cabin, a bastion of his world, gave way to the humid air of a small regional airport, a mere speck on the map compared to the bustling international hubs he frequented. A luxury SUV, pre-arranged, awaited him, its dark windows reflecting the stark contrast between the pristine tarmac and the dusty, winding roads that would soon lead inland. Each mile eaten by the powerful engine widened the chasm between his life in the gleaming metropolis and the quiet, forgotten corners of the world he was now re-entering. The journey was not just physical, it was a visceral cross-section of disparate realities, an emotional descent from the lofty peaks of his self-made empire to the foundational soil of his origins. As the paved roads dwindled into gravel paths, the landscape began to shed its modern veneer, revealing the familiar, rugged beauty of his childhood. Fields of swaying crops stretched out, punctuated by ancient trees that seemed to guard the timeless secrets of the land. The occasional farmhouse, weathered by sun and rain, stood as a testament to lives lived simply, deeply intertwined with the rhythm of the seasons. It was a world he had consciously outgrown, yet felt an undeniable pull towards. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, filled his lungs with a forgotten fragrance, triggering a cascade of memories he had meticulously compartmentalized for a decade. Each turn of the wheel felt like a page turning in an old, well-worn book, each vista a faded photograph coming back into vivid focus. Then, through a clearing, the village appeared. It stood nestled in the valley, largely unchanged from the blueprint etched into his memory. The cluster of modest homes, the small church steeple piercing the sky, the meandering river that always seemed to whisper stories. It was all there, a living diorama of his youth. A wave of nostalgia, potent and disorienting, washed over him, tinged with an unexpected unease. He was no longer the barefoot boy who had dreamt of escape, but a wealthy outsider, a phantom from a past that had moved on without him. The familiarity was unsettling, making him feel like a trespasser in his own history. The village, suspended in its own quiet time, seemed almost oblivious to the whirlwind of prosperity and change he represented. He felt a peculiar alienation, a sense of being both intimately connected and profoundly foreign. As the SUV slowed, rumbling over the uneven cobblestones of the village square, heads began to turn. A few older men, gossiping outside the general store, paused mid-sentence, their weathered faces creasing with recognition. A woman carrying a basket of vegetables stopped, her eyes widening. Whispers followed in his wake, a mixture of awe and veiled curiosity. He recognized some faces, though time had etched deeper lines and silvered more hair. There was Mr. Petrov, the baker, a little stoop-shouldered, but still emanating the comforting scent of fresh bread. Michael offered a small, hesitant nod, and Mr. Petrov returned it, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, perhaps remembering the ambitious boy he once knew. From these brief, almost silent encounters, Michael gleaned fragments of information pieced together from hushed tones and knowing glances. He heard snippets about Alara, spoken with a reverence that puzzled him. "She's done well for herself," one man murmured to another, not unkindly, but with a hint of provincial pride. Another woman, catching his eye, offered a half-smile. "Ilara's a strong one, always was." The words were vague, cryptic, and offered no confirmation of the hardship he had envisioned. Instead, they painted a picture of resilience, a quiet strength that contradicted the dire implications of the letter. Each passing interaction, each fleeting remark, only heightened his anxiety, adding layers of doubt to his carefully constructed expectations. The image of a struggling Alara, alone and destitute, began to fray at the edges. The SUV rounded a final bend, and Ilara's family home, or at least the path leading to it, came into view. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had spent the entire journey bracing himself, mentally preparing for a scene of rural poverty, perhaps a rundown shack, a pale, worn-out Ilara, broken by circumstances. The letter had been purposefully vague, hinting at difficulties, leading him to construct a narrative of her struggle. He had envisioned his return as a grand gesture, a rescue mission. Now, with every familiar landmark, with every subtle hint from the villagers, his imagined scenario felt increasingly flimsy. He pictured her face, twisted with resentment, or perhaps worse, dulled by despair. The guilt, a constant companion throughout the journey, intensified, churning in his gut. He imagined the weight of his success pressing down on her, a cruel twist of fate. How would she look at him? Would she even speak? The anticipation was a suffocating cloak, wrapping him in a growing sense of dread. as he prepared himself for the inevitable confrontation with the woman he had left behind. The SUV finally pulled to a gentle stop before a small, rustic gate. Michael's gaze darted forward, his breath catching in his throat. This couldn't be it, could it? He had envisioned a collapsing structure, overgrown with weeds, a testament to neglect and hardship. Instead, before him stood a modest but impeccably maintained house, its whitewashed walls gleaming softly in the afternoon sun. Vibrant climbing roses, a riot of crimson and pink, trailed artfully over a wooden trellis beside the front door. The small garden, far from being barren or forgotten, was a kaleidoscope of blooming flowers and meticulously tended vegetable patches, everything arranged with an obvious love and care. It radiated a quiet resilience, a vibrant energy that completely defied his grim expectations. He felt a jolt, a disorienting shift in his internal landscape. This was not the picture of destitution he had meticulously constructed in his mind. Then he saw her. Amidst the verdant splendor of her garden, just beyond a cluster of sunflowers taller than himself, Ilara was tending to a row of herbs. She wore a simple, light cotton dress. Her dark hair, threaded now with wisps of silver, gathered loosely at the nape of her neck. She moved with an easy grace, her hands, still slender and elegant, carefully pruning a basil plant. 10 years had passed, and time had undeniably left its mark, softening the sharp angles of youth and adding a certain gravitas to her features. Yet, the overall impression was one of profound peace and strength. Her posture was erect, her movements deliberate and confident. She wasn't the broken woman he had braced himself to encounter. She was an embodiment of quiet dignity, utterly self-possessed. A stray beam of sunlight caught her profile, illuminating a faint smile as she inhaled the scent of the herbs, and in that moment, Michael felt a profound tremor run through him. He stepped out of the vehicle, the crunch of his expensive leather shoes on the gravel path sounding unnaturally loud in the serene afternoon. Ilara paused, straightening up slowly. Her gaze, as it lifted to meet his, was initially one of mild curiosity, then a flicker of recognition, and finally, a settled calm. There was no gasp, no look of shock or accusation, not even a hint of the resentment he had so vividly imagined. Her eyes, those familiar deep pools of warmth he remembered so well, held a serene depth he couldn't quite decipher. This complete lack of expected reaction threw him entirely off balance. He had prepared for anger, for tears, for bitter words, but not for this composed, almost welcoming tranquility. A knot tightened in his stomach, a complex swirl of relief, confusion, and a renewed, sharper pang of inadequacy. "Michael?" Her voice, gentle and warm, carried across the short distance, cutting through the stillness of the afternoon. It held no tremor of anger, no edge of reproach. It was simply her voice, older, perhaps a little richer, but unmistakably Ilara's. He found himself unable to speak, his carefully rehearsed apologies and explanations dissolving into a jumbled mess in his mind. He just stood there, caught between the past and the startling present, utterly disarmed by her composure. A soft smile bloomed on her face, a genuine, unforced expression that warmed his cold fear. "It's been a long time," she said, devoid of any accusatory tone, merely stating a fact. She wiped her hands on her dress, a gesture so ordinary, so unburdened by drama, that it further unsettled him. "Come in, Michael. You must be tired from your journey." She walked towards him, her steps unhurried, radiating an unexpected warmth. Her presence was a comforting contradiction to his internal turmoil. As she reached him, he half expected a cold shoulder, a distant formality, but instead, her eyes held a soft, almost empathetic understanding. It was as if she sensed the weight of his guilt and chose not to add to it. She turned, gesturing towards the open door. "Please make yourself at home." He followed her into the small, immaculate house. The interior, like the garden, spoke of careful attention and a quiet, domestic artistry. Simple, hand-carved wooden furniture gleamed softly, woven rugs covered the polished floorboards, and terracotta pots held fragrant herbs on the windowsill. The air was filled with a comforting scent of dried lavender and something subtly spicy, perhaps from a pot simmering gently on the stove. This was not the home of someone merely surviving. It was the home of someone truly living, flourishing even. Ilara moved effortlessly, retrieving a ceramic teapot and delicate cups from a wooden cupboard. "Tea? Or perhaps something stronger if you prefer," she offered, her back to him as she filled the kettle. Her casual hospitality, her very normalcy, was a blunt force against the narrative of a wounded, suffering Ilara he had carried for a decade. He watched her, a stranger in his own past, feeling a strange mix of comfort settling over him, an almost primal sense of belonging he hadn't realized he missed, intertwined with a profound, aching regret that transcended mere guilt. He had come prepared for a battle, for tears, for accusations, but he was met with nothing but unexpected kindness. This gentle reception, so utterly unlike what he had anticipated, made his self-reproach burn even more intensely. His driver pulled the luxurious vehicle to a gentle stop just a short distance from the old, familiar gate. Michael stepped out, the polished leather of his shoes sinking slightly into the soft, unpaved earth. He took a deep, shaky breath, the scent of blooming jasmine and damp soil filling his lungs, a smell he hadn't consciously registered in over a decade. His eyes scanned the premises, bracing himself for the stark reality he had so vividly imagined. But what he saw was not the decaying structure of his nightmares. It was a modest, yet impeccably maintained home, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. Vibrant petunias spilled from window boxes, a riot of purple and pink against the green shutters. A small, neatly tilled garden flourished beside the house, rows of healthy vegetables reaching towards the sky. The scene was one of quiet prosperity, a testament to care and sustained effort, radiating a surprising vitality that directly challenged his preconceived notions of hardship. Then he saw her. Ilara. She was in the garden, her back to him, tending to a row of what looked like young tomato plants. The years had etched faint lines around her eyes and at the corners of her mouth, but they were lines of character, not despair. Her dark hair, though perhaps a shade or two lighter, was still pulled back in a simple, practical braid, just as he remembered. She moved with a quiet elegance, her hands deftly working the soil, her posture erect and purposeful. She wasn't the broken, resentful woman he had rehearsed countless times in his mind. She was strong, composed, radiating a serene confidence that struck him instantly. A profound wave of conflicting emotions washed over Michael. Relief, first and foremost, a deep, unexpected surge of it that she wasn't suffering. But beneath that, a gnawing confusion, a sense of inadequacy, and an almost painful realization of how profoundly mistaken he had been. The narrative of rescue he had so carefully constructed for himself crumbled into dust. He cleared his throat, a small, involuntary sound that carried across the gentle afternoon air. Ilara paused, her movements ceasing, and slowly straightened, turning to face him. Her gaze met his, and for a long moment, time seemed to dissolve. There was no gasp, no overt display of shock, no anger flashing in her eyes. Instead, a calm, almost serene expression settled upon her features, a flicker of recognition, perhaps a touch of surprise, but dominated by a quiet dignity. "Michael," she said, her voice softer than he remembered, yet possessing an underlying strength that resonated deep within him. It was a simple acknowledgement, devoid of melodrama, utterly disarming. He had prepared for accusations, for tears, for a scene, but her composure offered none of it. She walked towards him, wiping her hands on her apron, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. "It's been a long time. Please come in. You must be tired from your journey." Her invitation was delivered with such natural warmth, such unassuming hospitality, that Michael found himself nodding dumbly, completely thrown by her lack of animosity. He had expected confrontation, but received only kindness, an unexpected balm that simultaneously soothed his guilt and intensified his regret. The years of silence, the chasm he had created between them, seemed to melt away in the face of her gentle welcome. Inside the house, it was just as he remembered, yet subtly improved. The familiar wooden furniture was polished to a soft sheen, hand-embroidered cushions adorned the simple sofa, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of freshly brewed herbal tea. Ilara gestured for him to sit, pouring him a cup before taking a seat opposite him, her gaze steady and open. "So," she began, her voice calm, "you received my letter?" Michael nodded, unable to form words, still processing the reality of her presence, so different from his tormented visions. "I didn't expect you to come, but I'm glad you did." She spoke without judgment, without resentment, a quiet matter-of-factness that further unnerved him. "A lot has changed since you left, Michael. For both of us, I imagine." She then began to speak, and Michael listened, captivated, as Ilara started to unravel the tapestry of her life since his departure. She spoke candidly, without self-pity, of the initial pain, the deep hurt that had settled heavy in her heart. "It was devastating, of course," she admitted, her gaze drifting momentarily to the window. "To have your dreams shattered so completely, I felt lost, adrift." But then her eyes met his again, clear and resolute. But after a while, that devastation began to shift. It became a catalyst, a force to build anew, not in the way we had planned, but in a way that truly belonged to me. Michael imagined the tears, the despair she must have fought, but she spoke of it with a resilience that bordered on awe-inspiring. She recounted how she had channeled that raw, potent energy of heartbreak into something tangible, something meaningful, right there in the very village he had so eagerly abandoned. Instead of succumbing to a life of quiet despair, as he had morbidly envisioned, she had plunged herself into two passions she had always nurtured: organic farming, a skill honed from generations of village life, and local crafts, nurtured by her grandmother. "The land," she explained, a gentle smile tracing her lips, "it always provides, if you treat it with respect. And our hands," she held them up, strong and capable, "they can create such beauty." Then came the revelation that left him utterly stunned. Ilara explained that her efforts, initially small and solitary, had gradually blossomed. She had started a cooperative, bringing together other women in the village, many of whom were struggling financially or felt they had no voice. "We shared knowledge, we shared resources, and most importantly, we shared a vision," she stated proudly. She spoke of the organic produce they now cultivated, not just for their own tables, but for markets in nearby towns, establishing a reputation for quality and sustainability. She showed him a small, worn ledger filled with careful entries, detailing their expanding sales, their growing membership. Then, she pulled out a photo album, its pages filled with vibrant images, women laughing as they wove intricate patterns into textiles, children helping harvest plump tomatoes, the finished crafts, pottery, carved wood, hand-dyed fabrics, displayed beautifully in a small, rustic shop, signs of their thriving enterprise. She had built a successful venture, empowering her community, creating sustainable jobs, and revitalizing the local economy, all from the very ashes of their shared past. Michael listened in stunned silence, his jaw almost imperceptibly slack. He had envisioned her suffering, perhaps clinging to the hope of his return. But instead, he found a woman who had not only healed, but had carved out her own remarkable success, entirely independent of him. A success built on community, resilience, and an unwavering spirit. His carefully constructed narrative of the poor, abandoned Ilara dissolved into nothingness, replaced by the image of a powerful, self-made woman whose achievements shamed his own singular pursuit of wealth. The SUV finally stopped at the unassuming gate of Ilara's home, a small, well-tended cottage surrounded by a thriving garden. Michael stepped out, his luxury suit feeling incredibly out of place amidst the simple beauty. He had braced himself for a scene of destitution, for peeling paint and sagging eaves, but what greeted him was a picture of serene vibrancy. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and rich, damp earth. He saw the flicker of movement he had noticed earlier, and there she was, Ilara, tending to a row of flowering bushes, her back to him. She looked up as if sensing his presence, and a soft, knowing smile touched her lips. She wasn't broken, not even close. She was radiant, a quiet strength emanating from her like a gentle hum. Her initial reaction had disarmed him completely. Instead of the anger or resentment he had anticipated, there was only a profound calm, a welcoming warmth that defied all his expectations. He had walked into her home, a place that felt surprisingly vibrant and full of life, and she had offered him tea, her voice a gentle melody of hospitality. Now, as the rich aroma of herbal tea filled the air, Ilara, with a serene grace, suggested they take a little walk. "I want to show you something," she said, her eyes twinkling with a shared secret. Michael, still reeling from the unexpected warmth of her welcome, simply nodded, a silent, humble passenger in this unfolding revelation. They stepped out of her cottage and began a short walk down a winding path past other houses, equally well maintained, but bearing the distinct mark of individual care and pride. The path soon opened up into a larger clearing, and Michael's breath hitched. Before him lay not the struggling, desolate village he had envisioned, but a landscape transformed. Expansive fields stretched out, rows upon rows of lush, green, organic vegetables thriving under the sun, meticulously tended. Women, some he vaguely recognized from his youth, worked with an almost joyous energy, their laughter echoing softly across the fields. They wore simple, practical clothing, their hands deftly moving among the crops, their faces alight with purpose. Here, Ilara explained, was the heart of the cooperative's agricultural efforts. She spoke of sustainable practices, of crop rotation, of soil enrichment, her voice filled with a passion that was both deeply informed and incredibly infectious. Michael saw the tangible results of her vision: healthy produce, abundant yields, and most importantly, a sense of collective ownership and pride among the workers. He was witnessing not just farming, but a community tending to its own future, cultivated with care and purpose. This was not about basic survival. This was about thriving. Next, she led him to a sturdy, recently constructed building, its walls adorned with vibrant murals depicting village life and bountiful harvests. Inside, the hum of activity was even more pronounced. This was the workshop, a bustling hub where local women, young and old, meticulously crafted an array of artisanal goods. He saw intricate hand-woven baskets, colorful textiles dyed with natural pigments, delicate pottery, and beautifully carved wooden figurines. Each item spoke of skill, tradition, and a deep connection to the land and its resources. Ilara explained how they sourced materials locally, how she had initiated training programs, teaching ancient techniques passed down through generations, and how she had introduced new designs that appealed to a wider market. Her marketing, she casually mentioned, often involved online platforms, connecting their small village creations to buyers far beyond their borders. Her entrepreneurial spirit, once masked by her quiet nature, now shone brightly, a powerful force for change. Michael watched, mesmerized, as a young woman intricately wove a pattern into a blanket, her focus absolute, her face beaming with quiet satisfaction. He saw the pride in their eyes, the camaraderie in their interactions, the empowerment in every focused gesture. Then came the moment that truly rendered him speechless. Ilara guided him to a smaller, brightly painted building nestled among the other structures, a small community center. Inside, children sat cross-legged on colorful mats, their eyes wide with curiosity, listening intently to an older woman reading a story. On another side of the room, several teenagers huddled over books, their faces furrowed in concentration. "This," Ilara said softly, a gentle hand gesturing around the room, "is our learning center. Funded by the cooperative's profits, it ensures our children have access to books, tutoring, and a safe space to learn." Michael looked at the faces, young and old, filled with hope, purpose, and a quiet sense of dignity. He saw children who giggled freely, women who worked with an undeniable sense of fulfillment, and a community that was woven together by shared purpose and mutual support. It was then, amidst the vibrant tapestry of Ilara's creation, that the full weight of his own misjudgment, his own narrow definition of success, crashed down upon him. He had come expecting to find a victim, perhaps even to offer a hand up, driven by a lingering guilt and a sense of responsibility rooted in his perceived superiority. Instead, he found a visionary, a leader who had built an empire of human connection and collective well-being. Ilara's wealth, he realized with a profound clarity that jolted him to his core, wasn't measured in mansions or private jets or stock portfolios. Her fortune was the collective thriving of her people. It was the laughter of children learning, the proud gaze of women earning their own livelihood, the vibrant health of the land they cultivated, the strong, interwoven fabric of a community she had meticulously, lovingly built from the ground up. This was true prosperity, a legacy far richer and more enduring than any material empire he had ever sought to build. His own ambition, his relentless pursuit of financial success, suddenly felt hollow, a solitary mountain of gold compared to the fertile valley of Ilara's making. He stood before her, a millionaire, feeling utterly impoverished in the face of her genuine, heartwarming abundance. What she had shown him wasn't just a thriving enterprise. It was a testament to resilience, passion, and the boundless potential of a spirit unbroken by hardship, but forged stronger by it. His preconceived notions of her hardship had not just shattered, they had dissolved into insignificance, replaced by an overwhelming sense of humility and a deep, unexpected reverence for the woman he had once left behind. He saw his own ambition in a new, perhaps hollow, light, realizing that true fulfillment might lie in connection, not just acquisition. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Michael and Ilara sat across from each other at a small, sturdy wooden table in her simple yet immaculately clean kitchen. The air, usually filled with the cacophony of his urban life, was here calm, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves outside. A warm, earthy smell filled the room, emanating from the modest meal Ilara had prepared. Fresh vegetables from her garden, a hearty stew, and homemade bread. Michael found himself picking at his food, his appetite diminished by the emotional weight of the day, his mind replaying every encounter, every revelation. He wanted to speak, to articulate the whirlwind of emotions churning within him, the profound sense of apology that clogged his throat, the overwhelming admiration that swelled in his chest. "Ilara," he began, his voice a little hoarse, barely above a whisper. He hesitated, searching for the right words, for a way to bridge the chasm of 10 years and countless unspoken regrets. I don't even know where to begin. What you've built here, it's truly incredible. I never could have imagined." His words trailed off, inadequate and clumsy. He looked into her eyes, expecting to see a flicker of resentment, a shadow of the girl he had abandoned. Instead, he found only a serene, understanding gaze, free from judgment. Ilara smiled softly, a gentle warmth radiating from her that instantly put him at ease, even as it made his own inadequacies feel more pronounced. "There's no need for grand declarations, Michael," she said, her voice a melodic balm. "What's past is past. We both made choices that led us to where we are today." She reached across the table, not to touch him, but to rearrange a stray leaf on a small vase of wildflowers, her movements graceful and unhurried. "My path wasn't easy, especially at first. You're leaving. It broke my heart, yes. It felt like the end of everything I knew, everything I had hoped for." Michael flinched, the words a raw, honest echo of the pain he had inflicted. He braced himself for the bitterness, the anger he knew he deserved, but it never came. Ilara continued, her gaze steady, her voice unwavering. "For a long time I felt lost, but then, as the dust settled, I realized something profoundly important. Your departure, painful as it was, also cleared a path. It forced me to look inwards, to find my own strength, to discover what I truly wanted, independent of anyone else." She took a sip of water, her eyes distant for a moment, lost in reflection. "It was a catalyst, Michael. An incredibly painful one, but a catalyst nonetheless. It made me realize that my dreams didn't have to revolve around leaving this village, or around someone else's ambition. They could thrive right here, nurtured by the very soil I grew up on." He listened, utterly captivated, the weight of his guilt paradoxically lessening as he understood her perspective. He had come expecting to play the role of the remorseful prodigal son, perhaps even the rescuer. Instead, he was merely an observer, witnessing the unfolding of a magnificent transformation he had, unwittingly, set in motion. He saw her not as a victim of his past actions, but as a triumphant survivor who had built something profoundly beautiful from the ashes of heartbreak. He had believed he was tearing her down, but she had used the rubble to construct her own foundation, stronger and more resilient than ever before. In that quiet kitchen, under the gentle glow of a single hanging lamp, Michael experienced an epiphany. He understood now that he hadn't been her savior, or even her ruin. He had simply been an event, a harsh lesson that had, against all odds, propelled her towards an even greater destiny. His success had been measured in money, in power, in solitary achievements. Hers, he now saw, was measured in community, in resilience, in the blossoming of countless lives she had touched. His perception of love, success, and happiness fundamentally shifted in that moment. He saw now that the love he had left behind wasn't just a romantic connection to a girl, but a deep, unspoken bond to a place, to values, to a way of life that now humbled him completely. He had thought love was about possession, about shared dreams of escape. Ilara had shown him it was about nurturing, about enabling, about building a world where everyone could flourish. His own life, for all its glittering accomplishments, suddenly felt hollow, a brightly lit stage with only one performer. Ilara's life, however, was a vibrant, bustling marketplace, full of laughter, purpose, and the rich tapestry of human connection. He understood now that true wealth wasn't about acquisition, but about contribution. It wasn't about what one took, but what one gave back. He yearned to express the depth of his understanding, the profound respect that now flowed through him, but words still seemed inadequate. The apology, he realized, no longer needed to be spoken. It was conveyed in the quiet humility of his gaze, in the stillness of his being, in the profound reverence he now held for the woman sitting across from him. Their shared meal, simple and wholesome, unfolded under the gentle glow of the setting sun, painting the small kitchen in hues of orange and gold. Michael, still reeling from the day's revelations, found his voice thick with unexpressed sentiments. He wanted to apologize, to articulate the depth of his regret, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate against the backdrop of Ilara's remarkable achievements. He cleared his throat, attempting to formulate a coherent thought. But Ilara, with her characteristic grace, seemed to sense his internal struggle. She simply smiled, a knowing, compassionate curve of her lips that disarmed him completely. She began to speak, not about their past, but about the future, about the next steps for the cooperative, gently guiding the conversation away from the precipice of awkward apologies. There was no romantic rekindling, no desperate plea for a second chance. The air between them, though thick with unspoken history, was cleared not by declarations of love, but by a profound mutual respect. Michael, his eyes still wide with admiration, found himself offering support, not as a wealthy benefactor descending to save a struggling enterprise, but as a humbled friend, genuinely eager to contribute to a vision far grander than his own. He spoke of resources, of connections he could make, of logistical challenges he could help overcome. Ilara listened intently, her gaze steady and appreciative, accepting his offer not as charity, but as a collaboration. It was a resolution of a different kind, one built on shared purpose rather than rekindled passion, far more enduring than any fleeting romance could have been. He wasn't her savior, he was merely a witness, now a potential partner in her continuing journey. Michael left the village the following morning, the crisp morning air carrying the scent of rich earth and blooming flowers. He carried with him not just the memory of Ilara's smile, but a profound transformation within his own spirit. The sleek, luxurious car that whisked him away felt different now, its opulence no longer a symbol of ultimate achievement, but a stark reminder of the solitary nature of his own success. The world of high finance, of cutthroat competition and endless acquisition, now seemed tinged with a certain hollowness, a stark contrast to the vibrant, interconnected world Ilara had meticulously built. He didn't return to his old life entirely the same. The lessons learned in that humble village, delivered not through sermons but through lived experience, began to subtly reshape his priorities. He found himself questioning the relentless pursuit of profit, the constant need for more. His sprawling mansion, once a sanctuary, now felt cavernous, echoing with the silence of a life lived largely for himself. He began to explore avenues for ethical investment, for philanthropic endeavors that truly empowered communities rather than simply providing handouts. He started dedicating more time to projects that aimed at sustainable development, projects that resonated with the values he had witnessed in Ilara's cooperative. It wasn't an overnight metamorphosis, but a gradual, deliberate reevaluation of what truly constituted a meaningful life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Michael would often find himself staring at the faded photograph of Ilara, the same one that had once stirred a mix of guilt and longing. But now, the emotions it evoked were entirely different. There was no longer the pang of remorse for what he had lost, nor a yearning for what might have been. Instead, his gaze held a deep, unwavering respect, a quiet awe for the woman she had become. The image of her youthful face, radiant with dreams, now served as a powerful reminder of the extraordinary strength and resilience that lay beneath. He realized, with a clarity that settled deep into his bones, that sometimes the greatest treasures in life are not found in what you acquire, but in the heart and indomitable spirit of those you once knew, in the profound impact they make on the world, often against all odds. Ilara had not just survived, she had thrived, creating a legacy infinitely richer than his own. Her success was not measured in dollars, but in dignity, in community, in a flourishing tapestry of lives uplifted by her vision. He understood now that he had been searching for something elusive in his quest for wealth, something he had unknowingly left behind in a village, embodied not in a romantic ideal, but in the unwavering purpose of a woman who chose to build, to nurture, to inspire. Her story became his constant, silent mentor, a beacon guiding him towards a path less traveled, a life rich not just in possessions, but in true, profound meaning. The journey back to the village had been a journey to himself, enlightened by the extraordinary woman he once loved and now admired beyond measure. What do you think Michael will do next with this newfound perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more extraordinary tales. Click here to watch our next captivating story, where we uncover another hidden gem of human resilience and unexpected triumph.